So, if you saw these three people on the street, who would you guess is the classically trained pianist, who's a world traveler, and who's legally blind and deaf? Now, I've photographed and interviewed hundreds of people, and it's become increasingly difficult for me to make assumptions about people. I'm trying to rely and learn to rely more on my gut instinct. So, who here is the single parent, who's an engineering student, and who's an aspiring police officer? And this time, just take a second to think about why you're coming up with the answer that you're coming up with. There's not a whole lot of information available here. So, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having biases. We all have biases. The problem occurs when we allow those biases to interfere with really getting to know who a person is. Now, at the time that I took these photos, these three women had something very essential in common with each other. What do you suppose that might be? And again, just think about why you're making the connections that you're making. So when I say I'm learning to rely more on my gut, it's because of people like the ones that I've shown here. My approach now is to consider people sort of a blank slate when I approach them, and then let them tell their own story. So this all really started for me back in 2010. I met a blind guy named Ace in front of First Avenue, and I was just fascinated with his story of riding the rails with his dog across the country. So talking to people like him sort of became my new obsession. I started using my camera as an excuse to approach people who I normally wouldn't approach. So I would talk to them for a little bit, take their portrait, and at the time I called the project Minneapolis Strangers. Then in 2011, I discovered Humans of New York, and I just completely fell in love with it. I realized pretty quickly that there were Humans of pages popping up all over the world, and I decided to relaunch my project as Humans of Minneapolis. So I just want to share a few things that I've learned about people through doing this project. We all want to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. There's a common need amongst us all for mutual recognition and human connection. Without it, we can really become socially isolated. Now, there's a lot of reasons why we might choose not to see certain people as we go throughout our day, but I think it's really important to remember that less fortunate does not mean less worthy of our care and attention. And don't underestimate the power of simply making eye contact with someone, or maybe smiling at someone, or just saying hello. When we acknowledge each other in that way, what we're really doing is saying, hey, I see you, you're here, you matter to me. We all need to be loved and accepted for who we are, not for who others expect us to be, but for who we really are. And there needs to be times when we can let go of those exterior expectations. Now, there's going to be times when we all need to be somewhat inauthentic. Maybe you're on a first date, or maybe you're at a job interview. But there's also a need to occasionally enjoy just the freedom of being ourselves. And I think that when you see someone who looks different, I feel very strongly that those people should be applauded for having the courage to just be themselves rather than looked down upon for refusing to conform. We're all just muddling our way through life. Every single one of us is kind of just walking around doing the best we can with what we have. And some of us have a lot less than other people have. Now, we've all seen photos like this on Facebook. Why is it that our hearts automatically break for animals on the internet, but not necessarily so much for each other? All human beings go through hardships. For instance, the woman on the right here spent over a year in the hospital away from her children. Dave on the left had terminal cancer, unfortunately has since passed away. So what I try to do now is just sort of cut people slack, because you just never know. And I want to read a quote from a woman named Sarah who I interviewed. She said, "We have such diverse backgrounds in this city, and I think that if more people were willing to have a conversation with someone they normally wouldn't, our city might feel a little bit more connected." I absolutely agree with her, so I want to offer a challenge to you. The next time you're waiting in line somewhere, or maybe riding the bus, try talking to a stranger. I know that that's a little bit scary, especially if you're from the Midwest, but you never know, you just might make their day. Thank you.